a stretch of asphalt desolate and seemingly infinite winds through the rugged Canadian wilderness. A road where the cold air holds the echo of untold stories, a place where a chilling pattern of disappearances began to emerge over half a century ago. This is the Highway of Tears, a 725-kilometer corridor along British Columbia's Highway 16, a place of immense beauty and profound dread. My investigation into this case started not with a suspect, but with a simple, unsettling question. How could so many disappearances and murders over decades, many with similar profiles, remain unsolved and seemingly unrelated in the eyes of the public for so long? The story of the Highway of Tears is not about a single serial killer in the traditional sense, but about a constellation of unsolved cases and the chilling possibility that one or more predators operated along this very specific vulnerable route. The official narrative begins with the disappearance of Monica Ignas in December 1974. Monica, just 15, was last seen walking home from a bus stop in Thornhill. Her body was found 4 months later in a desolate area off the highway. This was one of the earliest documented cases that would later be linked to the highway's dark legacy. But it wasn't until a decade later that the pattern began to truly solidify in the public consciousness. In 1989, Alberta Williams, a 24-year-old from the Gitxsan First Nation, was last seen hitchhiking near Prince Rupert. Her body was found a month later. These cases, separated by a decade, shared a common thread. Young women, often Indigenous, vanished while hitchhiking or walking along Highway 16. It was a common practice in these remote communities, where public transportation was nearly non-existent. The records show a devastating chronological escalation. Next came the evidence that forced investigators to see a pattern where they had previously seen isolated incidents. The case of Colleen McMillan, a 16-year-old who disappeared near Lacklash in August 1974, was initially a separate missing persons file. Her remains were discovered almost a year later. You might think these were just tragic, unrelated crimes in a vast, remote province, but forensic evidence would soon tell a different story entirely. A decade later, DNA evidence from the remains of Colleen McMillan was re-examined with new technology. A second crucial piece of evidence emerged from the case of Gail Weys, a 19-year-old who vanished from Clearwater in October 1973. The discovery in the Weys case was particularly chilling, a tiny shred of fiber found on her clothing. Years later, forensic analysis connected this fiber to an earlier crime scene. What emerged next forced a complete re-examination of the evidence. The turning point came with the 2012 announcement that DNA from the remains of both Monica Ignas and Colleen McMillan was a match to a man named Bobby Jack Fowler. Fowler, an American who had died in an Oregon prison in 2006, had a history of violent crimes. This was the first time a specific individual was definitively linked to two of the official Highway of Tears cases. The FBI file on Fowler revealed a history of transient employment in British Columbia in the mid-1970s, placing him in the exact timeframe and geographical area of the disappearances. His criminal history included sexual assault and kidnapping. The initial narrative of unrelated tragedies was suddenly replaced by a focused, terrifying truth. A confirmed serial predator had been operating on the Highway of Tears. But if this document is authentic, the official timeline collapses. The RCMP officially linked Fowler to Ignas, McMillan, and a third victim, Gail Weys. This synthesis created a working theory. Bobby Jack Fowler was a serial killer, active on the Highway of Tears, responsible for at least these 3 deaths. Yet, this provisional conclusion left a significant number of cases unexplained. The pattern of disappearances extends well beyond the mid-1970s, stretching from the 1960s to the 2000s. Still unknown is whether Fowler was responsible for more of the cases, or if other predators were also at work. The records show a missing page, a gap in the timeline that suggests the possibility of multiple killers. The sheer volume of missing and murdered Indigenous women along this route over a span of decades strongly suggests a complex, systemic issue rather than the work of just one man. The fact that many of these cases remain unsolved despite the Fowler breakthrough points to the existence of more perpetrators. The aftermath of this investigation has had a profound impact. It galvanized a national conversation about the systemic marginalization of Indigenous women and girls in Canada. The term Highway of Tears itself has become a somber symbol of a larger crisis, pushing for changes in law enforcement practices and public policy. The story of these women has been kept alive not just by official investigations, but by the relentless activism of their families and communities who continue to demand justice. The legacy of these cases is a stark reminder of the vulnerability faced by those in remote communities and the enduring need for greater safety measures, from public transit to increased police presence. The investigation continues, but one precise, unsettling question remains. If Bobby Jack Fowler was confirmed as the killer in 3 cases, and other cases share a similar M, what does the absence of a DNA match for the majority of the victims tell us? Is it a sign of different killers or simply the limitations of outdated forensic evidence? To explore this unresolved lead further, the investigation into the full scope of the Highway of Tears continues.